The church doors swung open just as the choir fell silent, and every head turned toward the wind. Snow blew in off Lake Michigan like a warning, and in the doorway stood Sheila Bennett, the woman William Ramirez had divorced last spring, wearing a simple black coat that didn't hide the unmistakable curve of late pregnancy. William's hand tightened around the program for his mother's funeral. The paper tore between his fingers. Beside him, Vanessa Pierce, his impeccably poised fiancée, leaned in and whispered, "She's here to make a scene." Sheila didn't speak. She walked down the aisle, gaze steady, stopping at the front pew where a velvet-cased envelope should have been. It wasn't there. Somewhere behind William's composed profile, a clock began to tick. The sanctuary smelled of lilies and winter wool. William stood when the pastor gestured to him. Words about Eleanor Ramirez, visionary, philanthropist, stern mother, rose from his throat and braided into the vaulted ceiling. He spoke of scrubbed Sunday shoes and sharp lessons about money. It's a tool, not a master. He didn't speak of the last argument he'd had with Eleanor, when she'd said, "You confuse control with care." When he stepped down, the pastor invited those with personal memories to share. A man from the foundation spoke. So did a neighbor with a tray of casseroles waiting in her car. Then, as if willed by the hush, Sheila rose. Vanessa's hand squeezed William's wrist. "Don't engage," she murmured. Sheila approached the lectern in flats that looked practical and tired. Her voice, when it came, was unvarnished. "Mrs. Ramirez sent me an email in August. She said family is the contract you can't tear up. She asked me to visit. I came once, quietly. We talked about forgiveness and responsibility." She paused, palm splayed over her stomach. "She asked me to keep a promise. She said I would know when." Murmurs swirled. William's jaw worked. He remembered Eleanor in August, thinner and newly tender, asking him who he'd become. He had said defensively, "A man who keeps things running." She had sighed, like a generator humming in a storm. Useful, loud, cold. Sheila's eyes moved to the front pew. The space where Eleanor's attorney had said a velvet case would sit with an envelope inside, to be read after the service. It was gone. She looked back at the room. "I'm not here to make trouble," she said. "I'm here to keep a promise." Afterward, people pressed Sheila with condolence and curiosity. Vanessa offered her an air kiss of compassion, so brittle it could cut. "You must be exhausted," Vanessa said, voice pitched for eavesdroppers. "These late months can be so unpredictable." Sheila's reply was quiet. "They're predictable enough if you've done this before." William blinked, the meaning striking him with a dull, old ache. He hadn't been there the last time. He'd been at a board retreat. Outside, the snow fell heavier. Black cars idled. Across the parking lot, Marlowe Kim, Eleanor's longtime lawyer, stood beneath a cedar, talking into her phone with her coat flung half-closed. William approached with the old deference he'd shown Marlowe since his father's time. "Where is the envelope?" he asked. Marlowe's eyes were dark with apology. "It was supposed to be under the spray at the front pew. It isn't. I had it last evening. I put it there myself after I closed the casket room. I'm looking into the cameras now." "Cameras?" Vanessa repeated lightly. "In a church? How tacky." Marlowe didn't smile. "We've experienced attempted document interference before." A gust sent snow spinning. William glanced back toward the doors, where Sheila stood, rubbing her side, breathing through a quiet contraction. Or a cramp, he told himself. He looked at Vanessa. Sleek hair, flawless lips, a bite of worry at the corner of her mouth. "We'll go to the house," he said. "We'll find it there." Vanessa slipped her arm through his. "Of course we will." Sheila watched them cross the lot. Her eyes flicked to Marlowe. "Mrs. Kim, she said, using the name Eleanor always had. If you need a statement, I'll give one. Eleanor asked me to. To say what? Marlowe asked. Sheila drew in a careful breath. That the truth won't fit in anyone's pocket. The Ramirez home in Lake Forest had never warmed, even in summer. Too much glass, too much slate, as if Eleanor had commissioned a mausoleum by mistake. Now the foyer swam with coats and condolence. A catered spread sat untouched in the dining room. Deviled eggs, ham biscuits, miniature quiches no one would eat. Vanessa moved like a hostess in a magazine, guiding people to sleek chairs, explaining where the powder room was. She had chosen the black sheath dress that meant business and bereavement. At the edge of the living room, William watched the crowd assemble in concentric circles of loyalty and opportunism. Board members, foundation directors, an aunt from Madison with a purse that doubled as a filing cabinet. Marlowe arrived with a young associate and a thumb drive. She asked to use the media room. William led her down the hall past Eleanor's closed study. He fetched the key from the Chinese bowl in the kitchen, the one his mother used to pretend was for oranges. The study still held Eleanor's lemon hand lotion scent, her pens aligned like soldiers, her paperweight of fused glass. On the credenza, a rosary box sat open and empty. "Recognize this?" Marlowe asked Vanessa, who had followed them with a little gasp. "I don't spend time in dead women's desk drawers," Vanessa said, and then flinched, masking it as grief. "I only meant, I wouldn't know." "We'll review the footage from the church," Marlowe said. "In the meantime, keep everyone here. The envelope is a codicil. Eleanor signed it 2 weeks ago." William's head snapped up. 2 weeks? "Yes. Witnessed, notarized, filed. The envelope contained a letter to accompany it." Marlowe's look softened, briefly. "It changes the trustee structure and other things." Vanessa set her hand on William's arm. "Changes?" she asked, bright and careful. "Surely nothing dramatic." "Dramatic," Marlowe said evenly, "is in the eye of the beneficiary." By the bay window, Sheila had found a chair near the radiator. The heat felt good against her lower back. She'd avoided this house since the divorce. The corners were filled with ghosts. A yellow mixing bowl she and Eleanor had used to make lemon cake on a rainy Sunday. The way light turned the hallway rug the color of tea in late afternoon. The first winter after she married William, she had put garlands on that banister and felt something like belonging. That was before the prenup renegotiation he'd sprung on her as a standard update, before Vanessa's soft laugh in conference rooms, before knowable cracks widened into canyons. William approached, awkward in his own home. For years their marriage had been a series of parallel agendas, his calendar and her patience, until the day patience quit like a long-suffering employee. "I didn't know you would come," he said. "Eleanor asked me," Sheila replied. She was kinder in the end than any of us deserved. He wanted to ask the question that had chased him all morning. "Is it mine?" But the words were a wound that needed the right room, the right light. Instead, he said, "You mentioned a promise." Sheila nodded. "To bring what she wrote into the room. To keep it from getting lost." "Nothing gets lost here," Vanessa said, arriving with 2 glasses of sparkling water. She handed one to Sheila, smile luminous. "We run a tight ship. Ships sink all the time," Sheila said, voice gentle, and took a sip. Marlowe reappeared. "We found it," she said. "On the footage. The envelope at the church. It was placed, and then it was not." "Who?" William asked, stomach dropping into a familiar freefall that had nothing to do with elevators and everything to do with his own blind spots. Marlowe looked at Vanessa first, then William. The camera was angled. All we can see is a dark sleeve and a hand with a very distinctive signet ring. "I'll ask guests to remain while we contact the police." Vanessa's fingers moved reflexively toward her left hand, bare except for a slim platinum band William had given her as a pre-engagement. She didn't wear a signet ring, but his cousin Darren did. So did the foundation chair. William stared at the mantel, where a portrait of Eleanor at 40 looked like she could step down and slap common sense into the room. He heard her voice. Family is a contract you can't tear up. He had torn plenty. Agreements, boundaries, the soft fibers of trust. Now the paper fibers lay somewhere, ink drying in the air. "Keep people here," Marlowe said again. "We'll read what I have of the codicil to the room. If the envelope isn't returned by then, I'll file an emergency motion." Sheila set her empty glass on a coaster. The baby shifted high beneath her ribs. She looked for a rare second at William, not as the man who had failed her, but as a man who might still choose. He thought of late nights in the old apartment over the deli they had loved before money bought a better place. He thought of the first time she'd laughed in that kitchen, head tipped back, a jam jar of daisies on the table. If redemption existed, he suspected it started with something as small as that, remembering the sound of someone you once loved and letting it matter. The house's powder room, just off the foyer, was the kind of place people disappeared to at wakes, emerging with composed faces. It had wallpaper like a field of muted peonies and a gilt mirror that could flatter a fever. Vanessa washed her hands too long, watching the water ripple. She wasn't a thief, she told her reflection. She was a protector. Eleanor had been a useful inconvenience, beloved and immovable. A codicil now, so soon, threatened everything Vanessa had built, from careful suggestion and immaculate timing. In her handbag, structured black leather, small enough to look polite, large enough to carry a future, sat a velvet envelope. She'd plucked it from the pew when William stood to speak, fingers steady, heart wild with the intoxicating clarity that came after panic. You act or you lose. The envelope wasn't the only copy. She wasn't stupid. But it could buy time. She dried her hands and stepped into the hall. Darren Ramirez, half drunk and already bitter, lounged against the console. His signet ring flashed on his right hand, a family crest bought with old money and new swagger. "Nice service," he drawled. "You should have cried more, sweetheart. People love tears." "Grief expresses itself in many ways," she said. He smirked. "So does ambition." Vanessa stared him down. Darren had once cornered her in a coat closet at a fundraiser with bourbon breath and flattery. She had sidestepped, as she sidestepped everything that did not serve the plan. He was useful now only as a silhouette that might take heat. In the living room, Marlowe called for attention. Guests arranged themselves, the chorus of chair legs scraping wood a brittle overture. "Eleanor executed a codicil," Marlowe said, voice carrying with courtroom grace. "It makes 3 main changes. First, the foundation's voting shares will be placed into a family trust with 2 trustees, myself and 1 family member, designated by a sealed letter, likely the one currently missing. Second, a portion of Eleanor's personal assets will be redirected to a community impact fund, specifically targeted to women-owned small businesses in Cook and Lake counties. Third," she paused as if stepping over a threshold. "Third, the codicil removes the restraining clause that prevented any bequests to future descendants of a dissolved marriage." William felt the room tilt. His aunt whispered, "What does that mean?" Someone else hissed, "It means she changed her mind about cut-offs." Sheila lifted her chin. Vanessa felt the perimeter of her world contract like a fist. "Eleanor believed in evolution," Marlowe continued. "She believed people could become more than their mistakes." Her gaze found William, and then Sheila, a subtle axis drawn between them. The letter will specify the trustee designation and an accompanying statement of intent. Without it, we have to move forward with a presumption based on the statute and filings. I would prefer not to. Vanessa smiled in a way that photographed well. I'm sure this can all be handled discreetly. Families don't need courts when they have love. Families need courts when they have money, Darren muttered. Marlowe's associate entered from the hall and whispered in her ear. Marlowe's mouth hardened. The church confirmed. A hand with a signet ring removed the envelope. We'll be contacting the police. Gasps. A small dismayed, "Oh," from someone who collected Waterford crystal. Sheila stood. Her voice was calm. Then perhaps the person with the envelope could simply set it on the mantel, and we could all go back to our grief. No one moved. Across the rugs and legalities, William looked at Sheila's hands, tinged with dish soap softness from years of doing for herself what money could have paid someone else to do. He remembered her first pregnancy, how she'd folded tiny shirts with reverence, how she'd held one up to her cheek and laughed. The miscarriage had stolen more than a heartbeat. It had stolen language. He'd tried to fix it with logistics. She'd needed a hand over her mouth, catching sobs in the dark. Not a calendar invite for try again. Vanessa's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number lit the screen. Check your coat pocket. Stage left, camera in the sconce. She looked up sharply. The sconces that bracketed the mantel were antique brass. Cameras inside? Eleanor, you paranoid witch, she thought, and then felt shame coat her tongue. But this was no time for sentiment. She moved toward the foyer, casual, weaving through condolences. At the coat closet, she slipped inside. She reached into the pocket of her own coat and felt Velvet's mild resistance. She exhaled. Then a voice came from the doorway. "That's not yours," Sheila said. Vanessa turned, smile lacquered. "Everything in here belongs to the family." Sheila's gaze held hers, soft and fierce. "I thought we weren't doing closets anymore." Something like a laugh cracked through Vanessa's shell. She had underestimated Sheila, her steadiness, her refusal to be bait. "You don't understand what's at stake," Vanessa said, and for once her voice was honest. "I do," Sheila said. A contraction gathered low and bright. She breathed through it. A child's future, a family's name, a woman's dignity. They stood framed by coats and the smell of cedar. For a moment, Vanessa saw herself, as if through the house cameras, an actress caught mid-scene. She placed the envelope on the shelf. "You should know," she said, softer. "Eleanor was going to name you." Sheila blinked. As Vanessa's eyes flicked away. "Trustee, with Marlowe." She left the closet without touching the envelope again, heels clicking like punctuation. Sheila stared at the velvet and felt her heart kick against bone. She took one step and then another, carrying the envelope toward the living room, like a woman bringing bread to a hungry table. Marlowe opened the envelope at the mantel with the pomp of someone who understood both symbol and statute. The room leaned in. She read aloud, "To my family. If you are reading this, then I have done the thing I told myself I would never do. Change my mind publicly. I have come to believe that stubbornness is simply fear dressed in discipline. I have been afraid that my generosity would be abused, afraid that my choices would be mocked, afraid that my love would make me look weak. I do not want fear to make my last decisions. I name Sheila Bennett as co-trustee with Marlowe Kim. I name her not because she married my son, nor because she divorced him, but because she kept showing up for people who didn't always deserve it, including me. She is, in my estimation, the bravest kind of person, one who will tell the truth even when the truth is an unflattering color. As to money, A river that only feeds itself becomes a swamp. Send it outward. Watch what blooms. As to legacy, a family is not its press release. A family is its kitchen at 2 a.m. Be kind to the person rummaging for bread. As to the child, I hope will be born healthy. May you never learn that love must be earned. Eleanor, the room exhaled. Someone sniffled. Darren rolled his eyes and then, catching Marlowe's look, attempted contrition. Vanessa stood near the doorway like a portrait hung slightly crooked. William could not swallow for a full 5 seconds. The sentence about the child lodged inside him and pulsed. He looked at Sheila, but her eyes were on the paper. The letter made her feel as if the ground under her was finally the right material, rock instead of glass. Marlowe folded the letter carefully. There will be filings, she said, because there always were. But the letter is clear. The codicil stands. The police will likely want to know where the envelope went. Vanessa raised her hand like a schoolgirl who planned to ace the test by disarming the teacher. I moved it, she said. I panicked. I put it in the coat closet because I didn't want it to get mishandled. I should have brought it to you immediately. I'm sorry, gasps. A handful of gratified looks. People who hated her now had a hook. Marlowe studied her. You'll put that in a statement? Yes, Vanessa said. Her voice did not shake. William felt something snap. A thread between the person he told himself he was and the person he had actually been with Vanessa. Complicit, distracted, willing to let charm do the work of conscience. Why? He asked her, genuinely. Vanessa's face rearranged itself into grief. Because I was afraid, she said. Afraid your mother's final act would undo everything we've built. We? William repeated. She held his gaze. For once, no performance. Yes, William. We. Sheila's hand went to the back of a chair. The contraction built and crested like a wave. Her breath stuttered. Marlowe noticed first. Are you all right? I'm fine, Sheila said, lied, and then the fine snapped in two. A sharp sound escaped before she could catch it. The room brightened at the edges. William moved without thinking. She needs a hospital, he said, already reaching for his coat. Now, I can drive her, Vanessa said automatically. Marlowe stepped in. No, William will. Sheila wanted to say she didn't need him. That was the old reflex. Self-sufficiency spiked with pride. But the car keys looked heavy in her pocket, and the cold outside promised to bite. She nodded, slow. Okay. The house shifted, as if a stage crew had changed sets. Guests murmured condolences, contact cards pressed into hands, casseroles retrieved. William guided Sheila out into the snow. The world smelled like iron and pine. For 2 blocks they said nothing, breath fogging. When the car heater finally caught, Sheila turned her face toward it and closed her eyes. Is it mine? He asked, because there was no right room, only this one. Her eyes opened. She had planned to say, it doesn't matter. She had planned to say, labels are for jars, not infants. Instead, honesty came. Yes, the car hummed. Outside, Lake Michigan shoved itself against the shore. William's hand tightened on the wheel. Okay, he said, and the word felt like a vow stripped to its studs. Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital was a quiet hive of urgent kindness. In the triage room, a nurse named Yvette checked Sheila's blood pressure and made a joke about winter babies arriving with scarves. Sheila smiled, grateful for the ordinary warmth of it, the way nurses had of placing humans in manageable categories without erasing their complexity. William stood at the window, looking at a parking lot the color of pewter. He had thought wealth could build a moat around pain. It could not. Pain walked on water. 34 weeks, Yvette said, noting Sheila's chart. Contractions irregular. Hydrate and monitor. She looked at William. You the dad? Sheila answered for him. Yes. It came out easier than she'd expected. Then drink this too, Yvette said, handing William a paper cup of hospital coffee. Dad's faint and they're heavier. She left with a wink that somehow unclenched the air. When they were alone, William said, Thank you. For what? Sheila asked. For not lying about me. I got tired of lying about myself, she said. It's contagious. He sat. The vinyl chair sighed. I'm sorry, he said. And if there'd been a ledger on the wall, years of late nights and missed dinners and clipped tones would have started marking themselves paid. I thought making money for us was the same as making us. It wasn't. Sheila looked at her hands. I should have said what I needed with words instead of silence. He laughed, small and wounded. We're a great pair. You went quiet, I went louder, and neither of us heard anything. What now? She asked. Now I ask what you want, he said. He had been trained to make offers so appealing that no one remembered to negotiate. This felt different. This felt like showing an open palm and waiting. I want peace, she said. For me. For this baby. Legal peace. Emotional peace. The kind you can sleep in. He nodded. Okay, we'll build that. And I want you to call Vanessa, Sheila added. Tell her the truth. You owe her that, even if, especially if, this ends everything for you two. He winced. You're an unusually decent person. I'm someone who doesn't want to be lied about, she said. It's different. He called Vanessa. She answered on the second ring. Is she okay? She asked, startling him with genuine concern. Dehydration, he said. Preterm labor scare. The baby. It's mine. Silence creaked. Then, okay, Vanessa said. Okay, I'm sorry, he added, because there was nothing else. I know, she replied, and sounded tired. I'll send a car for myself. I'm leaving the house. Marlowe wants statements and the police want ring photos. The ring wasn't yours, he said. No, she agreed, but the decision was. Vanessa, he began. Don't, she said, not unkindly. Go be a father. When he hung up, Sheila watched the line of his mouth soften. She's stronger than I gave her credit for, Sheila said. She's many things, he replied. Strong is one of them. Yvette returned with water and a plan. They would keep Sheila overnight to monitor. Stress, she said, clipping a monitor to Sheila's belly, is an excellent liar. It tells your body there's a tiger in the pew when there is only grief. Sheila smiled. You should put that on a card. As monitors beeped their calm metronome, William told Sheila about Eleanor's letter. Sheila told William about the afternoon she'd spent with Eleanor in late September, how they'd made lemon cake and argued about forgiveness. She said I forgive too quick. I said she forgave too slow. She forgave, William said, in the end. Forgiveness isn't the end, Sheila replied, eyes on the monitor. It's a key to a gate. Then you've still got to walk. Marlowe worked like a woman whose sleep had been repossessed. She took statements, pulled camera footage, called in favors from a detective who owed her $2.50. In the footage from the church, the sconce camera showed Vanessa in the coat closet with the envelope. Her confession held. Another camera showed Darren loitering near the pew, hand hovering as if auditioning for a crime he did not quite commit. Marlowe called Darren to the study. He arrived drunk with indignation. You can't treat me like a suspect, he said. I can treat you like a relative, Marlowe answered, which is worse. She slid a set of photos across the desk. The signet ring, the sleeve, a posture that might belong to any man who had been taught the world was furniture. Darren blustered, then deflated. It wasn't me. I thought about it. Everyone thought about it. Vanessa just did it. She confessed, Marlowe said. And now she'll live with that. The codicil stands, Darren. The trust will be difficult for men like you. You'll need receipts." He glared. "I have receipts." "Then you'll be fine," she said, and dismissed him with the gentle brutality of a woman who had done this too long to waste time. At the hospital, William spent the night in the vinyl chair and woke each time a nurse murmured. He stared at the ceiling and thought about what it would mean to make room. In his calendar, in his home, in his heart. Money took up space. So did regret. So did hope. The trick, he realized, was not adding but subtracting until the right things had room. In the morning, Sheila's contractions had settled into the background hum of a body working at the speed of its own wisdom. A resident cleared her to go home with rest and a list of foods that sounded like a kindergarten pantry. On the way to the elevator, they passed a newborn behind glass. The tiny mouth opened in a silent yawn. Sheila's breath hitched. In the lobby, reporters flickered like moths. News had leaked. Headlines would love them. Billionaire's pregnant ex at funeral. Missing will. William led Sheila through the side exit to the parking garage. He had never been good at side doors. This felt like learning to navigate the world without a brass key. At home, her home, not his. Sheila sank into the couch with a blanket and a list of instructions from Yvette. Eat, drink, sleep. Laugh at one sitcom rerun daily. William set a grocery sack on the counter. He'd bought every ginger ale in the store and came back with the diet kind by accident. "I'll make tea," he said, eager to be useful. She watched him in her small kitchen, where plants did better than people. "You can go," she said, not unkindly. "I know you have 100 fires." "I have one fire," he answered. "It's here." He looked around. Photos on the fridge, her sister's kids, a Polaroid of Sheila holding a lemon cake in a thrifted apron. "Can I fix the door latch?" he asked. "It catches." "Yes," she said, surprised by how easily yes arrived. As he bent with a screwdriver and a new humility, his phone vibrated with a message from Marlowe. "Emergency hearing today, 3 p.m., probate court. We need you and Sheila both. Vanessa, too." He glanced at Sheila. "Court," he said. "You up for it?" She set down her tea. "I guess we walk." The courtroom in downtown Chicago smelled like dust and damp wood. It had the sad echo of a school gym. Judge Armanda Velasquez presided with an arched eyebrow that could lift a boulder. On one side sat Marlowe with William and Sheila. On the other, a foundation attorney whose cufflinks looked like they'd never seen daylight. Vanessa sat behind them, alone, her posture precise and freshly human. Marlowe spoke first. She laid out the codicil, the letter, the attempted interference. She did not call Vanessa a thief. She called her a panicked party, which was both accurate and merciful. The foundation attorney argued that Eleanor's mind had been in decline and that late changes bore scrutiny. Marlowe produced video of Eleanor 2 days before signing, lecturing a board member into dignified silence. The judge watched for 2 minutes and blew out a breath. "If that's decline," she said, "I can only aspire." Then came the sealed letters effect, trustee designation, and the removal of the restraining clause. The attorney sighed and asked for a temporary injunction. Judge Velasquez denied it, with the satisfaction of someone ignoring a request to ruin a Tuesday. "And the interference?" the judge asked. "Is the state pursuing charges?" A detective rose. "At this time, we have a confession from Ms. Pierce. Given the property was returned and the circumstances, funeral, heightened emotion, the state will hold on charging pending formal complaint from the estate." Marlowe turned to Sheila, whose hand had moved to her stomach as if protecting a secret orchard. "Miss Bennett?" Sheila stood. Her voice did not tremble. "I don't want charges. I want order." "That's a first," the judge muttered, not unkindly. "What do you want, Miss Pierce?" she asked. Vanessa rose, chin high. "I want to apologize to the court, to the family, and to Ms. Bennet. I did a stupid thing because I was afraid. It won't happen again." "See that it doesn't," the judge said. "Now, to the matter of the trust. The court recognizes the codicil and the trustee appointments as valid. Ms. Kim, Ms. Bennet, congratulations and condolences. It's a messy job." Afterward, in the marble hall where voices ricocheted, Vanessa approached Sheila. Up close, without the audience, she looked younger. "I meant it," she said. "I know," Sheila answered. "Here's what I need from you. No leaks, no back-channel gossip. If anyone asks, you tell them what you told the judge." Vanessa lifted a hand as if to swear. "Okay. And thank you," Sheila added, surprising herself, "for putting the envelope back." Vanessa's laugh was a single bright sound. "I wish I could say it was conscience. It was a text from an anonymous guardian angel telling me the house had eyes." She glanced at Marlowe, who smiled the ghost of a smile. "Your mother-in-law was more thorough than the CIA. Ex, Sheila corrected gently. Then her eyes softened. "Maybe not for long." She surprised herself again. "Or maybe forever. Either way, we'll be kind." Vanessa nodded. "Be kind," she echoed, and the word sounded like a new language she could learn if she practiced. William joined them, tentative. "Sheila," he said, "do you want to come by the house later? Eleanor's lemon bowl is yours. You used it more than she did." Sheila glanced at Marlowe. "We have trustee duties," Marlowe said cheerfully, like reviewing a mountain of paperwork and saying no a lot. "But after that, yes," Vanessa stepped back. "I'll pick up my things. I'll send someone for the rest next week." William reached out, touched her elbow, a benediction without promise. "Take what you need," he said. "We'll settle fairly." "Imagine that," Vanessa said softly. "Fairness." She turned and walked into the late afternoon light that turned the granite columns the color of old honey. 2 weeks later, when sorrow had settled into the corners of the house like dust, Marlowe and Sheila met in Eleanor's study with stacks of files. They learned the language of the trust, disbursements, audits, oversight so granular it might as well be embroidery. They made small, firm decisions that would ripple outward into food trucks and daycare grants and women replacing broken furnaces. In a bottom drawer, Sheila found a brown accordion folder labeled in Eleanor's clean hand. April, private. Inside lay 2 things. The first, a printed email from William to Eleanor, sent after the miscarriage years ago, in which he wrote, "I don't know how to fix this. If money could do it, I would write a check with the whole world on the payee line. Tell me how to be a son who doesn't make you ashamed, and a husband who doesn't make her grieve alone." Eleanor had replied, "You can't fix grief. You can carry groceries and listen. Start there." The second item, a bank statement showing monthly transfers from Eleanor to someone named Alicia Gomez, the woman who had cleaned the Ramirez house for 20 years, each note reading, "For the boys' braces, for the exam, for the deposit." There was a sticky note attached. "No one gets rich alone." Sheila sat with the paper, the way one sits with a truth that rearranges a room. When William joined them later, she showed him the folder. He read the email and lowered himself into a chair as if sitting down was an apology. He traced his mother's handwriting with a finger. "She must have been tired of my speeches," he said. "She wanted me to carry groceries." "You're carrying a lot now," Sheila said. He met her gaze. "I want to carry with you." They talked, carefully, like people walking back into a house that had burned and been rebuilt. They did not pretend the fire hadn't happened. They admired the new beams. They named the scorch marks. That night, in her own little kitchen, Sheila thought about the story she had told herself for years. That she had left because she was small and he was big, because power imbalance was a beast you couldn't train, only escape. She realized a more precise truth. She had left because the power was misused. What she wanted now was not to flatten power, but to bend it toward gentleness and accountability. Her phone pinged, a photo from Vanessa, a potted rosemary plant on a windowsill. For your kitchen, think of it as an apology that is also a herb. Sheila laughed out loud, texted back a heart. Across town, Vanessa sat in a one-bedroom with good light. She had taken a job at a non-profit that taught financial literacy to women starting over. She wasn't a hero. She wasn't a villain. She was a woman recalibrating. Her signet ring text to herself, "Don't be that again," glowed on a post-it above her desk. Spring arrived with sidewalk chalk and mud. The foundation board gathered in a high room overlooking the river. New trustees, Sheila and Marlowe, sat at the head, Eleanor's chair empty but present. William presented without flourish. He talked about measurements that mattered. Childhood asthma rates near the factories the foundation had once ignored, graduation rates rising when daycare stipends kicked in. He did not talk about market cap. When an old guard member tried to bully Sheila into delaying the community fund while we recalibrate our optics, she placed her hand flat on the table and said, "We're not calibrating optics, we're changing outcomes." Marlowe hid a smile. William looked at Sheila the way you look at a lighthouse from a ship that once believed itself self-sufficient. 2 days later, Sheila went into labor. It was a Tuesday. The air smelled like rain on warm stone. In the delivery room, Yvette, God bless her, appeared like a recurring character in a series you hope never gets cancelled. "We're doing this," she said. "You ready?" "Ready," Sheila said, and meant it. William stood by her side, learning the complicated skill of being present without trying to manage. When panic rose, he breathed. When fear whispered, he said the simplest prayer he had, "Please." When the baby arrived, red and outraged and perfect, he cried in a way that surprised him because he didn't do that, and then realized he did now. They named the baby Lila Eleanor. Lila as in night and softness. Eleanor as in steel and lemon cake. Later, when the room went still, Sheila watched William hold their daughter. The way he looked at Lila made Sheila think of ocean floor photographs. New life clustered around shockingly hot vents. The harshest places grew strange gardens. On the third day, Marlowe visited with flowers and a file. "You don't have to read this now," she said, "but when you're ready." It was the final accounting of the estate, attached, a letter from Eleanor to Lila. "I hope you grow into hands that lift more than they grasp. And I hope you forgive me for all the ways I didn't learn that sooner." Sheila cried because postpartum hormones and also because love. Vanessa came by the next week with the rosemary plant, an awkward smile and a gift, a stack of freezer meals labeled with cooking times. "I learned these from the non-profit kitchen," she said, pride warming her voice. She held Lila for a minute, marveling at fingers that looked like exclamation points. "We're okay," Sheila told her quietly. "I know," Vanessa said. "I plan to be too." Lila woke hungry at 2:03 a.m. The kitchen light glowed butter soft. William warmed a bottle while Sheila leaned against the counter and watched the steam ghost the window. Outside, the city was a dark animal breathing. "She sounds like a tiny opera singer," he said. "She'll grow into a voice," Sheila murmured, bone-tired and happy. "Remember Eleanor's line?" he asked. "About the kitchen at 2 a.m. being kind." Sheila smiled. "We're here." He handed her the bottle and sat, close enough for his knee to brush hers. They didn't talk about remarriage. They didn't draft a new press release for the family. They fed a baby in the quiet house and listened to the radiator knock like an old friend. When Lila slept again, they opened the back door. The spring night smelled like wet dirt and something electric. On the porch, a potted rosemary from Vanessa sat sturdy. William reached for Sheila's hand. She let him have it. In the months that followed, order did not mean ease. There were nights Lila screamed, and days lawyers emailed, and mornings the trust required the kind of yes that cost. There were also afternoons when a woman from Waukegan brought a tray of tamales to the foundation office and cried because the microgrant meant her shop did not close, and evenings when William put his phone in a drawer and took Lila to the park, and Sundays when Sheila baked lemon cake in a bowl that once belonged to a difficult, beloved woman who had changed her mind just in time. At the first board retreat since Eleanor's death, they met not at a resort, but in a community center gym painted the color of toothpaste. The coffee was bad, the chairs were worse. They wrote on butcher paper and took bathroom breaks when mothers needed to pump. At lunch, William gave a speech that wasn't a speech. "We're here because money can either feed itself or the neighborhood," he said. We know which one Eleanor chose at the end. After the meeting, Sheila found him by the vending machine, feeding it dollar bills that kept spitting back. "Machines like you," she teased. "They preferred me when I was all numbers," he said. "People seem to like me better now." He pressed the selection again. The machine gave up a bag of pretzels, like a lesson in persistence. They ate them on the steps. He looked at her in that easy way that had returned, not like a man waiting for a verdict, but like a man building a kitchen at 2 a.m. "I'm ready," he said softly. "When you are." She thought about contracts you can't tear up. She thought about keys and gates and walking. She thought about the tiny body upstairs at daycare, and the rosemary on the sill, and the lemon cake in the oven that would be devoured by a room full of people who'd never imagined the hours that went into the crumbs. "Soon," she said, and kissed his shoulder. "Let's keep walking." They did. In the end, the story didn't make headlines, because the good stories rarely do. A baby slept. A woman who had once been underestimated managed a trust like a lighthouse. A man who had confused power with care learned where to put his hands. And another woman took a job that paid less, but made more sense. And, one day, taught a class where a mother of 3 realized she could open a savings account with $10 and a dozen brave decisions. Eleanor's letter sits framed above the kitchen desk, the one about kitchens at 2 a.m. There are nights when exhaustion wins and dinner is crackers and cheese. There are mornings when the trust meeting runs long and daycare calls anyway. There are choices to forgive and choices never to repeat. But the arc bends, not because apologies are magic, but because people decide to be kind at inconvenient hours. If this story moved you, I'd love for you to like, share, and subscribe. It helps more women find stories that feel like their own, messy, brave, and beautifully real.
Waitress sat on Billionaire's lap to escape her ex. He whispered, "Play along, I'll protect you." What if a single moment of desperation could change your entire life forever? Grace's hands trembled as she carried the coffee pot through the crowded downtown cafe, her eyes constantly darting toward the window. She'd spotted Derek's truck circling the block for the 3rd time, and her heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird. At 35, she thought she'd finally escaped the nightmare of her past. But here he was again, hunting her down like she was his property. The lunch rush buzzed around her. Business executives in expensive suits discussing deals over steaming cups, completely unaware that her world was crumbling with each passing second. That's when she saw him. A distinguished man in his early 40s sitting alone at the corner table, his kind eyes meeting hers with an understanding that made her breath catch. Something about his presence felt safe, protective, like shelter in a storm she'd been weathering for far too long. Where are you watching from today? I'd love to know in the comments below. James Crawford had built his fortune from nothing, starting with a small tech company in his garage and turning it into a billion-dollar empire. But success hadn't hardened his heart. If anything, it had made him more aware of those who struggled. He'd chosen this quiet cafe for his morning meetings precisely because it felt real, authentic, far from the cold marble lobbies of corporate towers. He'd noticed Grace the moment she started working there 3 months ago. There was something in her eyes, a wariness that spoke of old wounds, yet she treated every customer with genuine warmth. She remembered how he liked his coffee, black with just a touch of cream, and always had a soft smile ready, even when she looked exhausted. Today was different. The smile was forced, her movements jerky with barely contained panic. James had seen enough fear in his life to recognize it immediately. Through the window, he spotted a burly man in a baseball cap leaning against a pickup truck, his gaze fixed on the cafe entrance with predatory intensity. Grace approached his table, the coffee pot shaking slightly in her grip. "More coffee, Mr. Crawford?" she asked, but her voice carried an edge of desperation that had nothing to do with customer service. "Grace," he said softly, setting down his newspaper. "Are you all right?" Her composure cracked for just a moment. "I'm fine, just tired." But as she turned to leave, the cafe door chimed, and a man with cold, calculating eyes stepped inside. Derek. Grace froze, her face draining of color. Derek's gaze swept the room before landing on her, and his lips curved into a smile that held no warmth. He started walking toward her, his presence commanding and threatening in a way that made other customers unconsciously step aside. Grace backed away, but there was nowhere to run in the crowded space. "There's my girl," Derek called out, his voice carrying just loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Been looking everywhere for you, baby. Time to come home." Grace's breathing became shallow, rapid. She looked around desperately, trapped between the advancing threat and a room full of strangers who had no idea they were witnessing the beginning of her worst nightmare. "I don't want to go anywhere with you, Derek," Grace managed, her voice barely above a whisper, but he kept advancing like a hunter who'd cornered his prey. "Now don't make a scene. Gracie." Derek's voice held that familiar edge of control, the tone that used to make her stomach twist with fear. "You know how this ends. You always come back." The cafe grew quieter as other customers sensed the tension, conversations dying mid-sentence. Grace felt her chest tightening, the familiar panic starting to take hold. 3 months of freedom, of finally sleeping without fear, and it was all about to disappear. That's when she made a choice that surprised even herself. James had been watching the exchange with growing concern, recognizing the dynamic immediately. He'd seen it before. A controlling ex who wouldn't accept that their victim had found freedom. When Grace's desperate eyes met his across the room, he didn't hesitate. Without thinking, Grace moved toward James's table, her legs shaking but determined. "I'm sorry," she whispered as she reached him. "Please, I just need—" "It's okay," James said quietly, understanding immediately. "Whatever you need." And then Grace did something that shocked everyone in the cafe, including herself. She sat down on James's lap, her body trembling against his as she wrapped her arms around his neck, playing the part of a loving girlfriend. James's response was immediate and protective. His arm came around her waist, steady and reassuring, while his other hand gently touched her back. "Play along," he whispered against her ear, his voice calm and confident. "I'll protect you." Derek stopped dead in his tracks, his face shifting from predatory confidence to confusion and then to anger. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, his voice rising. James looked up at Derek with the kind of quiet authority that came from years of commanding boardrooms and facing down hostile takeovers. "Is there a problem here?" His tone was polite but carried an underlying steel that made Derek take an involuntary step back. "That's my girlfriend," Derek snarled, but some of his confidence had evaporated in the face of James's composed presence. "No," Grace said, surprising herself with the strength in her voice. "I'm not your anything anymore." She felt James's arm tighten protectively around her, giving her courage she'd forgotten she possessed. If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. Stories like these remind us that sometimes strangers become heroes in our darkest moments. Derek's face darkened, his hands clenching into fists. You think some suit's gonna protect you? You think you can just disappear on me? The menace in his voice made several cafe patrons reach for their phones, sensing the situation was escalating beyond an awkward encounter. Grace felt herself shrinking inward, the old fear trying to reclaim her. For 2 years, Derek had controlled every aspect of her life through intimidation and manipulation. Even after she'd finally escaped, she'd been looking over her shoulder. Knowing he'd never stop hunting her, I think, James said, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of a man who'd never backed down from a fight. That the lady has made her feelings clear, and I think you should respect that. You don't know what you're getting into, buddy. Derek stepped closer, trying to use his size to intimidate. Grace and I have history. Real history. Not some fake little show she's putting on for you. That's when Grace spoke up, her voice stronger than it had been in years. Our history is exactly why I left, Derek. Because you couldn't understand that love isn't about control or fear or making someone feel small. It's about trust and respect and... She looked at James, seeing something in his eyes that Derek had never shown her. And feeling safe, Derek's face contorted with rage. Safe, I protected you. I took care of you when nobody else would. You isolated me, Grace said, the words tumbling out like a dam had burst. You made me quit my job, cut ties with my friends, and made me believe I was worthless without you. That's not protection. That's imprisonment. The entire cafe had gone silent now, every person understanding they were witnessing something profound and painful. An elderly woman at a nearby table had tears in her eyes, remembering perhaps her own struggles from decades past. James felt Grace's body trembling against his, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was the trembling of someone finally finding their voice after years of silence. The police are on their way, he said calmly, nodding toward the barista who'd quietly made the call. I suggest you leave before they arrive. Derek looked around the cafe, seeing every face turn toward him with disapproval and disgust. For the first time, he was the one who felt exposed and powerless. Have you ever found the courage to speak your truth when it mattered most? Let us know in the comments. Your story might inspire someone else who needs to hear it today. Derek stormed toward the door, but turned back one last time. This isn't over, Grace. It's never over. The cafe door slammed behind Derek, but the tension remained thick in the air. Grace still sat on James's lap, her whole body shaking now that the immediate threat had passed. She suddenly became aware of where she was, of what she'd done, and embarrassment flooded through her. I'm so sorry, she whispered, starting to pull away. I shouldn't have... Hey, James said gently, his hand steady on her back. You have nothing to apologize for. You were brilliant. 2 police officers arrived within minutes, their presence immediately calming the atmosphere. Grace slid into the chair beside James as she gave her statement, her voice growing stronger with each detail. She showed them the restraining order she'd filed months ago, the documentation of Derek's violations, the photos of bruises she'd been too ashamed to show anyone before. We've been looking for him, Officer Martinez said, his expression grim. There are 3 other women with active cases against him. Your testimony could help put him away for a long time. As the police finished their report and left to search for Derek, the cafe slowly returned to normal. But Grace felt anything but normal. For the first time in years, she felt powerful, protected, and, most surprisingly, hopeful. Thank you, she said to James, her eyes bright with unshed tears. You didn't have to do that. You don't even know me. I know enough, James replied, his voice warm. I know you're brave, even when you don't feel like it. I know you make the best coffee in the city. And I know you deserve to feel safe. Grace laughed, a sound she'd almost forgotten how to make. The coffee's actually terrible here. I've been trying to convince my boss to get a better supplier for months. Maybe you should open your own place, James suggested, and something in his tone made her look at him more closely. I happen to know something about starting businesses. And I have a feeling you'd be amazing at running your own. The idea had never occurred to her, Derek had always told her she was too stupid for anything like that. But sitting here now, seeing herself through James's eyes, she felt a spark of something she'd thought was gone forever. Ambition. "I couldn't possibly," she began. "Why not?" James asked simply. "What's stopping you now?" If you've been enjoying this story of courage and new beginnings, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales that remind us love and hope can triumph over fear. 6 months later, Grace stood behind the counter of her own small coffee shop, Fresh Starts Cafe, watching the morning rush with a satisfaction she'd never imagined possible. The walls were painted a warm yellow that reminded her of sunshine, and local artists' work hung throughout the space. But her favorite spot was the corner table where a certain businessman sat every morning, reading his newspaper and ordering coffee, black with just a touch of cream. Derek was serving 18 months in prison after 3 more women had come forward with their own stories. The restraining order was permanent now, and Grace slept peacefully for the first time in years. But more than the legal protection, she'd found something infinitely more valuable. She'd found herself again. James had been true to his word about helping her start the business, providing not just financial backing but genuine guidance and support. Their relationship had grown slowly, carefully, built on trust and respect rather than fear and control. He never pushed, never demanded, never made her feel anything less than completely free to choose her own path. "The usual?" Grace asked as James approached the counter, though they both knew it was more ritual than question by now. "Actually," James said, his eyes twinkling with mischief, "I was thinking of trying something new today. What do you recommend?" Grace smiled, understanding the deeper meaning in his words. They'd both been trying new things lately. Grace had enrolled in business classes at the community college, and James had started volunteering at a shelter for domestic violence survivors. They'd learned that healing happened not just in grand gestures, but in small, daily choices to build something better. "I've got this new blend," Grace said, reaching for a different canister. "It's called Second Chances. It's got a smooth finish with just a hint of sweetness, and it's stronger than you might expect." "Perfect," James said, watching her prepare the cup with the same care she brought to everything in her new life. "That sounds exactly like what I need." As she handed him the steaming mug, their fingers touched briefly, and Grace felt that familiar warmth that had nothing to do with the coffee. She'd learned that real love didn't demand or control. It simply stood beside you, steady and strong, offering support when you needed it and space when you didn't. The morning sun streamed through the cafe windows, casting everything in golden light. Grace looked around at her little kingdom, her customers chatting over breakfast, her employees laughing as they worked, James settling into his corner table with his new blend of coffee, and felt a deep sense of peace. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is trust someone enough to let them help you. Sometimes salvation comes in the form of a stranger who whispers, "I'll protect you," and means it. And sometimes what starts as an escape becomes the beginning of the life you were always meant to live. If you enjoyed this story of courage, love, and new beginnings, please remember to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe for more heartwarming stories that remind us hope is always possible. Thank you for joining Grace and James on their journey. May you find your own fresh start when you need it most.